Um, I'm very happy to have you with us today for this opening plenary session of the second edition of the MIX.E trade show. So my name is Aurélien Goyer, I'm the communications director at OPO, and today I'm here to moderate the finest exchange you can imagine about energy transition, and which is for sure at the forefront of all concerns these days. We will all agree, I guess, that this is just the beginning. A few questions we'll cover in this session. What have done Europe, nations, regional administrations, companies since the beginning of the crisis in this unprecedented context? And most importantly, how did it impact our citizens, in particular the most vulnerable ones? Final questions, maybe one of the most important ones. Once we somehow manage to turn off the emergency mode, what do we do in long term to change the situation for real? So to do so, to answer those questions, I have with me 7 great guests, and to get the ball rolling, I am pleased to welcome on stage Thierry Kovacs, Vice President in charge of Environment and Positive Energy at Auvergne-Rhône-Alpes Region. Thierry, if you want to join us.
Bien, mesdames, messieurs, bonjour. Je tiens tout d'abord à vous remercier pour votre invitation aujourd'hui. Et je veux en préambule excuser le président de la région Auvergne-Rhône-Alpes, Laurent Wauquiez, qui, en raison de contraintes d'agenda, n'a pu venir ce matin. Il le regrette d'autant plus que le salon MIX, dont c'est la deuxième édition, correspond totalement à la philosophie, la volonté, la vision de notre président pour faire face à la fois aux crises énergétiques et climatiques. Nous croyons en l'intelligence collective, à la recherche, à l'innovation que vous mettez en avant à travers ce salon, pour faire émerger les solutions face à ce double défi, donc énergétique et climatique. Nous croyons aussi au mix énergétique, à la complémentarité entre l'énergie nucléaire et les énergies renouvelables pour atteindre la neutralité carbone et gagner en souveraineté énergétique. Nous croyons aussi en notre capacité à faire de cette crise, de cette double crise, une opportunité, comme ce fut le cas finalement après le premier et le second choc pétrolier. Je vous rappelle que la souveraineté énergétique de la France était de 25% dans les années 70, face à la réduction de la production, de l'explosion du prix du pétrole, de l'inflation que ça a entraîné, ce que nous vivons aujourd'hui. Nous avons développé, notamment en France, un vaste programme nucléaire et nous avons développé en même temps les énergies renouvelables, de sorte que nous sommes passés de 25% de souveraineté énergétique dans les années 70 à plus de 55% aujourd'hui. Alors les défis qui sont aujourd'hui devant nous sont plus importants qu'à l'époque, puisque nous devons répondre, comme dans les années 70, aux urgences sociales et économiques face à l'explosion du prix de l'énergie et ses conséquences. Nous devons en même temps accélérer, massifier la décarbonation par la transition énergétique, ce qui nécessite un peu plus de temps et surtout la mobilisation d'importants moyens financiers après une pandémie qui aura coûté cher, très cher, à des États qui ont vu leurs dettes également s'envoler et leur capacité à agir se réduire. Donc au-delà des mesures d'urgence pour soutenir les secteurs en difficulté, un certain nombre de professions, bien évidemment, ont été mises en difficulté avec cette explosion du prix de l'énergie. Et la région Auvergne-Rhône-Alpes les a accompagnés sous l'impulsion de son président Laurent Wauquiez. La région Auvergne-Rhône-Alpes est compétente en matière de climat, d'air, d'énergie. Et nous avons décidé de faire de la question énergétique une priorité. Priorité autour de 2 axes. Le premier, c'est celui de la réduction des consommations, avec un objectif de réduire de 23% les consommations sur le territoire de notre région d'ici 2030. Et deuxième objectif, celui du développement de la production des énergies renouvelables, avec un objectif de plus 54% de production à l'horizon également 2030. L'énergie que nous ne consommons pas, c'est bien évidemment celle qui coûte le moins cher et celle qui génère bien évidemment le moins d'émissions de gaz à effet de serre. L'objectif de réduction doit d'abord s'appliquer à nous-mêmes dans la région, c'est ce que nous faisons. En respectant des consignes de chauffage, nous avons réduit de 30% nos consommations énergétiques sur le bâtiment du siège cet hiver, mais également en lançant un vaste plan ambitieux de relamping de l'ensemble de nos lycées avec le changement de tous nos luminaires en LED, avec un objectif là, de 40 à 50% d'économie de consommation électrique dans nos lycées, avec le plan Marshall des lycées, un vaste programme de rénovation de ceux-ci pour qu'ils consomment moins. Ça, c'est ce que nous nous appliquons. Mais en même temps, nous voulons accompagner, aider les entreprises à faire face justement à cette explosion des prix de l'énergie en finançant des audits énergétiques et en aidant à l'investissement qui permet d'optimiser les consommations électriques à travers un dispositif régional, en lien notamment aussi avec BPI. Nous voulons aussi, bien évidemment, aider les particuliers. Nous avons fait la promotion et nous avons signé le dispositif EcoWatt ou EcoGaz pour inciter chacun à réduire ses consommations et en même temps à éviter le blackout, la coupure généralisée sur une partie de notre territoire de la fourniture, notamment d'électricité. Mais nous soutenons aussi les particuliers avec le service public de la performance énergétique, accompagner les particuliers dans des projets de rénovation de leur logement, et également en mobilisant des crédits de l'Europe, des fonds FEDER notamment, auprès des bailleurs sociaux, pour que ceux-ci puissent rénover leur logement et passer d'une étiquette énergétique E, F, G à un équivalent BBC. En même temps que nous voulons réduire nos consommations, nous voulons favoriser le développement des énergies renouvelables à travers plusieurs grands projets, à commencer par l'énergie solaire. Nous avons un objectif, celui de multiplier par 4 la puissance installée d'ici 2030 sur la région Auvergne-Rhône-Alpes, avec un objectif à 2030 de 6,3 gigawatts crête. Ça passe bien évidemment... alors, la technologie du solaire, bien évidemment, est aujourd'hui mature et elle est aujourd'hui rentable. Il y a un sujet, c'est celui de la mobilisation du foncier des toitures. Et en cela, la région, bien évidemment, se mobilise, d'abord en mettant en disposition l'ensemble des toitures de ses lycées, avec un vaste plan de solarisation de nos lycées, de nos parkings, avec une délibération qui est prévue au mois de juin, avec un appel à projet que nous avons lancé auprès des entreprises, des agriculteurs, pour mobiliser tous ceux qui sont prêts à mettre du foncier à disposition, des toitures à disposition, et plus de 1600 entreprises, acteurs du territoire, ont fait connaître leur intention de voir solariser les toitures de leurs bâtiments. Et nous lançons, lors de la prochaine session, un appel à projet pour créer une offre clé en main. C'est une idée de notre président. C'est regrouper des acteurs qui permettront à la fois de faire cette étude de faisabilité, la réalisation, la conduite du projet, l'installation des panneaux, la signature des contrats, le raccordement, l'ensemble du dispositif pour faciliter la vie de nos chefs d'entreprise qui doivent d'abord être concentrés, bien évidemment, sur la vie de leurs entreprises. Mais nous ne nous arrêtons pas là. Nous avons un grand projet sur les grandes zones économiques, comme PIPA, 1000 hectares, comme la zone de Chêne, en lien notamment avec l'INES et le CEA. Et puis, nous mobilisons aussi les bailleurs sociaux qui doivent mobiliser la totalité des toitures. Ce sont 595 000 logements en Auvergne-Rhône-Alpes qui pourraient être solarisés. Et là-dessus, bien évidemment, nous favorisons l'autoconsommation, parce que l'autoconsommation, ça va être cet outil qui va nous permettre à la fois de réduire, bien évidemment, notre empreinte carbone, mais de réduire pour les bénéficiaires de ces installations d'une maîtrise des coûts dans la durée. Lever les freins, c'est aussi lever les freins sur le désamiantage avec cet appel à projet que nous avons mené, un vrai succès, pour financer le désamiantage des toitures d'entreprises ou de bâtiments agricoles en vue de la pose de panneaux solaires. Rapidement, la méthanisation fait partie aussi de notre feuille de route, avec une multiplication par 15 de l'énergie produite d'ici 2030 en finançant, en soutenant. Un nouvel appel à projet va être mené, donc la méthanisation agricole. Et puis le grand sujet auquel le président est attaché, c'est l'hydrogène. L'hydrogène qui est la solution pour décarboner bien évidemment la mobilité lourde ou intensive, mais surtout aussi pour décarboner notre industrie. Je rappelle que Auvergne-Rhône-Alpes est la première région industrielle de France et qu'elle a la chance d'avoir sur son territoire 80% des acteurs de la filière hydrogène. Donc l'hydrogène, c'est bien évidemment dans notre stratégie favoriser sa production jusqu'à l'usage, en passant par l'acheminement, le stockage et la distribution, en soutenant bien évidemment aussi l'innovation, la recherche et la formation, parce que c'est générateur bien évidemment d'emplois. Et cette filière de l'hydrogène, bien sûr, elle apporte aussi cette clé qui nous manquait pour pouvoir stocker l'électricité durablement et rétrocéder celle-ci quand c'est nécessaire. Voilà, je ne veux pas être plus long. Voilà les quelques axes stratégiques de notre feuille de route. J'aurais pu parler du bois, de l'énergie, de la chaleur fatale. Alors cette stratégie, elle doit nous permettre, ce sera ma conclusion, de répondre, à la nécessité de réduire durablement nos émissions carbone, et puis rapidement plutôt d'ici 2030, et d'atteindre la neutralité carbone avant 2050, et c'est bien l'objectif du président Laurent Wauquiez. D'ailleurs, nous aurons un grand plan de décarbonation qui sera présenté avant la fin de l'année. Nous travaillons avec le CEREMA sur cette feuille de route. Et 2, elle répond à la nécessité de gagner en souveraineté énergétique. Une souveraineté qui doit nous permettre de mieux maîtriser les coûts pour nous assurer d'une acceptation sociale des prix de l'énergie et d'une compétitivité également des prix de l'énergie pour nos entreprises et nos industries, sous réserve que les gains que nous fassions ne soient pas soumis par des accords internationaux et voire européens, en particulier européens, qui nous fassent perdre ces gains, bien évidemment, de coûts par une corrélation sans lien avec les coûts de production. Voilà. Merci en tout cas de l'organisation de ce salon, auquel nous sommes très heureux de pouvoir participer.
Merci à vous, Monsieur Kovacs. Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. I think it's very interesting to see what regional and local institutions and how they are embracing the crisis management in a way. Thank you for this. Now we will welcome virtually Monica de Volder. I hope you are with us. Monica, she's the policy officer at the European Commission, and she will share with us her vision of the story and how she perceives you are with us. Hi, Monica. And how she perceived the actions that were put in place by European institutions since the beginning of the crisis. So, Monica, I hope you're doing well, and the virtual floor is all yours.
Thank you very much. And once again, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very happy to join today's MIX.E 2023 conference. I'm a little bit sad that I was not able to join you in person, but at least virtually. So my name is Monica de Volder, and I'm representing the European Commission, where I'm working in the Department on Consumers, Local Initiatives and Just Transition at DG Energy. And yes, I would like to share with you very briefly some thoughts from the EU perspective. So as we all know, the war in Ukraine and related energy crisis has been causing high energy bills for consumers, jeopardizing people's ability to access energy, which is as essential as food or water. And we have seen more and more families having being forced to make the choice between heating and eating this winter or last winter. And let's face it, we are in the cost of living crisis. We need to do everything we can to avoid the rise of social tensions and a questioning of the green transition, which we have seen as well. And our role is to protect households in need, especially those in most vulnerable situations, because we've seen that especially those energy poor or low income were most impacted in the energy crisis because they pay much more or bigger share of their incomes on energy. Now, what is interesting or what is important to notice is that for the first time in recent memory, we've seen that middle-income households in Europe faced the prospect of not being able to pay their energy bills. And this is, of course, supported also by the data we have. So according to Consumer Condition Scoreboard in 2020, from 2023, we have seen that last year, almost half of consumers were worried about being able to pay their energy bills. We also see that many consumers took action. Over 70% did something to reduce energy consumption at home. And what is alarming also is that 37% of European consumers report that they have dipped into their energy in their savings, sorry, not energy savings, in their savings, to be able to afford to pay their energy bills, but also everything else. And the EU has been taking decisive measures to help citizens and businesses to overcome the crisis and protect consumers from the impact of high energy prices. As you may know, already in October 2021, the European Commission put in place a toolbox with different measures that member states can implement to protect consumers from the impact of high energy prices, be it direct payments for bills or support measures for energy renovations. And this toolkit was further expanded with the adoption of series of emergency measures. Before winter, we've seen urgent need to act, and there are, of course, different tools, legislative, non-legislative, how it's possible to act, and some take more time than others. And what we did is we engaged with the key stakeholders, with energy companies or with representatives of energy companies, suppliers, distribution system operators, consumer organizations, and energy regulators. And we discussed how to act urgently and help consumers in the energy crisis. And the result was a joint declaration on enhanced consumer protection, which was signed in December. And it was to protect the most vulnerable ones during the winter times. Of course, this is a voluntary commitment, but I think it's a very important signal that all stakeholders agree that it's important to act. The signatories, to explain a little bit more, committed to implement 4 types of urgent measures. First of all, to offer consumers in need bill deferrals and payment plans for a limited period of time. Second, to avoid disconnections of consumers going beyond what was already implemented at the national level. Third, to refrain from unaltered contract changes during the winter. This is practice we have seen in quite some countries and was quite surprising for consumers. And last, to provide clear information to every consumer. It sounds very evident, but it's not always the case. So consumers should understand the situation and should be provided with the guidance or advice on solutions at their disposal. So this is just an example of non-legislative initiatives, and we are looking at how this joint declaration worked out in practice, what is the real impact, and we also reflect what to do for next winter, because the crisis may not be over yet. Although some voices may say differently, but I think it's important to bear that in mind. Before looking into the future, I think it's also good to draw a few lessons learned from the past. And of course, energy is essential good, and we need to ensure that the needs of the people and the economy are covered and energy remains affordable. We also need to ensure that no one is left dependent on fossil fuels. So especially those in most vulnerable situations on low income needs to be in the focus. But one lesson learned, I think, is that the measures need to be well targeted. They have a huge impact on national budgets. And what we have seen is very often that there were broad measures provided, some things like vouchers, for instance, were provided to everybody. And maybe some consumers needed less than others, while others would actually probably appreciate more help. And the second point is that, or second lesson is that any kind of measure should still incentivize to save energy. Of course, here we again need to look at where it's possible to save. Consumers in energy poverty already consume so little energy that's probably impossible for them to save. But I think it's important to keep that in mind. Well-targeted measures, and still make sure that there are incentives to to save energy. Now, let's look into the longer term. The only way to truly support consumers is to help them improve the energy efficiency of their homes and replace fossil fuels with renewable energy. And the lower the income of consumers, the more urgent it is to limit their exposure to fossil fuels. I think this is important. In fact, as it was also mentioned already this morning, the energy crisis has reinforced our need to become independent from fossil fuels and transition to renewable energy sources. Our objective of climate neutrality is an opportunity to address pre-existing inequalities in society and get on board those most affected. And our goal is very clear: deliver the transition in a fair and just manner, leaving no one and no region behind, because we know that the transition will fail if society is not engaged in the energy transition. And in the EU, just transition is recognized as one of the key pillars of the European Green Deal, the blueprint for the EU's economic policy and implementation of our climate commitment under the Paris Agreement. Now, before going into my last point about electricity market design and the Commission's proposal, which was published in March, I would like to also say that we have strategies, we have also very good legislations in place, but sometimes what we are missing is implementation. Just to give you a very concrete example, the Clean Energy Package, which was agreed some years ago, electricity directive under this Clean Energy Package already aims to strengthen consumer position in the energy market, improves consumer rights, improves consumer protections, gives consumers the right to easily engage in renewables. And becoming a prosumer and producing and using your electricity at home or feeding into the grid should be as easy as downloading or uploading content on the internet. But sometimes it is still not the case in some countries. So I think that there is also some work to be done. Now, last point, I would like to say a few words about the electricity market design. When we were preparing the proposal for the electricity market reform, we've heard a lot of reflections, a lot of questions or questioning electricity market design. How far shall we go in the proposal? And I think it's important to remember that for over 2 decades, the electricity market design has served European companies and consumers well, letting them enjoy the benefits of a single market. Data shows it very clearly. According to Acer, cross-border trade of energy and the integration of electricity markets brought 34 billion euros a year in benefits over the last decade. And even during the last year, the European electricity has delivered. Despite the gas and electricity scarcity situation, we have not experienced blackouts. But the recent crisis has shown also some shortcomings. That is the impact of high and volatile fossil fuel prices on short-term electricity markets, which exposed households and companies to significant price spikes and excessive electricity bills. Therefore, the reform is focusing on 3 areas. First of all, making energy bills of European consumers and companies more independent from the short-term market price of electricity. Second, enable an accelerated deployment of renewables and the phase out of gas. And third, improving consumer protection, providing consumers choices, be it fixed price contract, dynamic price contract, and also allowing them to, enabling them to have direct access to renewable generation through energy sharing and self-consumption. And we believe that with this reform, consumers and companies will be better protected against any possible future price shocks. And the market, the system, and the investment incentives will be there for renewable energy deployment that we need in order to achieve our climate goals. And with this, I would like to thank you for your attention. And I wish you exciting conference.
Thank you very much, Monica. Thank you very much for your speech. Always very, very interesting to have the European and macro perspectives on all these topics. Thank you, Monica.
Thank you very much.
So now we will welcome François Gemène. He's a political scientist and researcher. So François has many, many hats, but he's known for sure as a specialist in environmental geopolitics and migration dynamics. During the preparation process, François has been very clear and direct about something in particular. The only thing he cares about is how our actions on environment and decarbonization can impact positively the habitability of the planet, and in particular impacting the most vulnerable people. So, François, I'm not sure if it's a good summary, but at least I will give you the floor so you can develop a little bit on this. Thank you for being with us, François.
Thank you very much. Good morning, and thanks a lot for having me as part of this plenary session, addressing indeed one of the crucial issues when it comes to climate change. I was struck, however, at the outset of the war in Ukraine to hear on TV and on radio specialists of defense and security saying basically the very same thing as we researchers on climate change had been saying for years, that our dependency on fossil fuels was a clear factor of vulnerability and of weakness. And it was quite striking all of last year during the reports on the war in Ukraine to see that the security and defense specialists were advising the EU to phase out fossil fuels, not for the sake of climate change, but for the sake of strategic geopolitical reasons. And then later on came the energy crisis. And then all specialists, economists, specialists of purchasing power, consumers associations were also saying that we had to get out of fossil fuels, not for climate change, not for security reasons, but simply because we could no longer control the prices of energy, and that these rising prices were putting a lot of households and companies in great difficulties. And therefore, all of a sudden, in the course of last year, there were two major additional reasons to phase out fossil fuels, which were the reasons of geopolitical autonomy and sovereignty, and purchasing power, and economic reasons to face the energy crisis and to be able to have some sort of command on the energy prices. The problem we have right now is that if one looks at the world's global energy mix, fossil fuels continue to represent about 85% of the global energy mix. Yet we know that if we are to achieve the objectives of the Paris Agreement, we need to reduce by 2030, we need to reduce the share of coal to 0%. And we need to decrease the share of gas and oil by 70 and 60% respectively. As of now, not only do fossil fuels continue to represent 84% of the global energy mix, but the share between fossil fuels, renewables, and nuclear has not changed a lot for the past 20 or 30 years. How is it possible, despite all the investments that were made in nuclear energy, but also in renewable energies? And the reason why this is still the case is because our energy consumptions has kept on increasing for the last 20 or 30 years. And therefore, the result is that we have continued to invest in both fossil fuels and low carbon energies. And as a result of this, low carbon energy sources have not at all replaced fossil fuel energies. They've just added up to fossil fuels in order to respond to the increasing demand of energy. And here, I need to be clear. There is absolutely no point in developing low carbon energy sources if these energy sources do not replace fossil fuels. We need to make a choice here. We cannot invest at the same time in fossil fuels and in low carbon energies. And if we continue to do so, we will end up in 10 or 20 years with still the same global energy mix, where fossil fuels will continue to represent 70 or 80 or 90% of the global energy mix, despite the development of low carbon energies. If we are to achieve a result where low carbon energy supplies would replace rather than adapt to the fossil fuels, we will need to decrease our energy consumption. The good news is that we have two great avenues to decrease our energy consumption globally. The first one being energy sufficiency, which is a very important term introduced in the latest report of the IPCC. And I think that during the war in Ukraine, everyone realized the importance of energy sufficiency. The other avenue being, of course, energy efficiency. And very often in public debates, and that's certainly the case in France and probably in other countries of Europe as well, there is a kind of binary opposition between energy sufficiency and energy efficiency, as if we had to choose between sufficiency and efficiency. We do no longer have the luxury to choose. Sufficiency is a matter of individual behaviors and public policies. Efficiency is a matter of technology and innovation. We no longer have the luxury to choose between both. We will need to go both ways. We will need to combine sufficiency with efficiency. And that's the recipe if we are to decrease our energy demand globally. And I think this is really the first point on which I wanted to insist today, on the need for low carbon energy sources to replace fossil fuels rather than adapt to fossil fuels. The problem is that because of the war in Ukraine, because of the energy crisis, we've invested a lot in fossil fuels. You all know it. Oil, coal, and gas companies have all recorded record profits last year because of the crisis and because of the rising energy prices. And as a matter of fact, all European governments, more or less, have had to provide subsidies to companies and to households so that they could afford their energy bills. But all of that money is a hidden gift to fossil fuel companies. And all of that money is money that will not be spent on the energy transition. And therefore, it is essential that we reorient investment flows toward low carbon energies and that we divert them from fossil fuels. I understand that this cannot be done in the snap of a finger, that this is a process. But right now, we need to recognize that we have not yet really initiated that process and that we continue to invest in low carbon energies, but also in fossil fuels. And both investments at the moment are extremely profitable, but one is good for the climate, the other is not. And from a climate viewpoint, these two investment flows annihilate each other. That's the first point that I wanted to make. The second point that I wanted to make is about the need for us to look beyond our borders. There is a wide agreement in the energy community that solar energy is the energy of the future, and that solar energy has an immense potential that will still develop over the coming years. And if we look at the rise of the capacity of solar energy, that potential is rising on pretty much all continents of the world, except for the continent that receives the most sunshine, that is the continent where this energy would be the most profitable, that is in Africa. And when we look at the different ways to decarbonize our economy, we have a tendency to focus primarily on our own greenhouse gas emissions. From a French viewpoint, the focus is to reduce French emissions. From a European viewpoint, the focus is to reduce European emissions. The problem is that the climate doesn't care about that. The climate doesn't care whether the emissions come from Lyon, Brussels, Lima, Washington, or Bangkok. They're all the same. And if we focus only on reducing our own emissions, and if we don't pay attention to what's happening beyond our borders, well, it means that in 10 or 20 years' time, we will be a decarbonized economy in an ocean of carbon. And that will be pointless. In 1960, European emissions represented 42% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions. Between 1960 and 2023, Europe has roughly doubled its greenhouse gas emissions. And yet, the share of emissions from Europe has dropped from 42% in 1960 to about 15% right now. And the reason for that is simply that Asia in particular, which represented 16% of emissions in 1960, now represent about half of the world's emissions. That means that the fight against climate change will also be fought in countries to which we pay too little attention today. These are the decisions about the energy mix in India, in Mexico, in Nigeria, in Egypt, or in Indonesia that will determine our climate future. We need to do much, much more to walk beyond our borders to decarbonize the energy mix on a global scale. And that is essential. If we don't do that, whatever we do to decarbonize the energy mix in France or in Europe will certainly be useful for geopolitical reasons, also for reasons of costs and prices, but will be useless for the climate. I'm very concerned today when I see the new projects to extract fossil fuels in Africa. Some African leaders like Senegalese President Macky Sall declares that fossil fuels are the key tool for the strategic autonomy of Africa vis-à-vis Europe. If we look right now at the new pipeline project, EACOP, in Uganda, and of course, this project is sort of a time bomb for the climate. But if one takes for a moment the viewpoint of Uganda, I was in Uganda last week, and the value of crude oil located in the soil of Uganda represents about 20 times the GDP of the country that is still one of the poorest countries on earth. And therefore, if we want Uganda not to exploit this oil, we need to offer Uganda more than protests and indignation. If I were to tell you that at the back of your garden, you have a treasure valued at 1 million euros, but that if you dig out that treasure, you would become an instant millionaire, but you would contribute massively to climate change, what would you do? You would tell me, well, if you want me not to dig out that treasure, you need to provide me with something in exchange. And right now, what we're providing African and global South countries in exchange is protest and indignation when they want to exploit their own fossil fuel resources. We need to realize that without massive investments, massive technology transfer to decarbonize the energy mix in countries of the global South, everything we do in France or in Europe will be useless when it comes to climate change. Of course, we need to decarbonize our own energy mix for ourselves, but also because if we don't live up to our commitments, there is absolutely no possibility to expect that other countries will also live up to their commitments. But we need to walk beyond our borders. And that is really the second message that I wanted to convey today, the need to decarbonize not only our own energy mix, but to walk towards decarbonization of the global energy mix. And the resources we have, the technology we have, give us an immense responsibility to work with countries of the global south so that their own development pathway, the one they will choose on their own, can be as low carbon as possible. So these are the two messages that I wanted to convey today. The need to choose between investing in fossils or investing in renewables and low carbon energy, and the need to look beyond our borders, beyond our own energy mix. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Francois. Thank you very much, Francois, and we hope to have you with us physically next year in MIX.E, the third
Absolutely,
edition.
I'll do my best.
Thank you so much for being with us. Now you're staying with us for the roundtable, Francois, so you'll be with us virtually as well. But now I'm happy to welcome on stage Noé van Alst, Vice Chair EPHE, Special Advisor at the International Energy Agency and Gaz-Uni, Amir Sharifi, Senior Managing Director at Ardian, Bernard Sala, CTO and Head of R&D at EDF, and Guillaume Armanet, Territory Customer Manager for the Southeast region at GRDF. Please welcome them on stage. Thank you. So thank you so much for being with us today. I think to start this roundtable, I ask any of you to introduce himself. Let us know what impact the energy crisis had on the organization that you are all representing today, and what role it played during the first stages of the energy crisis in particular. So we can start with Noé, if it's okay for you.
Okay, sure. Is this working? Yeah. Yes. Well, thank you very much for having me in this panel. If I have to summarize, because I have several, as you mentioned, Mr. Moderator Aurélien, several hats on. As with my hat on for IPHE, I can say that in the global hydrogen space, I have to say, we can definitely see speeding up of the plans to use low carbon hydrogen also to indeed start replacing fossil fuels. So of course the driver for hydrogen and for clean hydrogen has always been climate change, but now indeed, like Francois already mentioned also in his lecture, now low carbon hydrogen is kind of added. You see that in the plans of the EU, Repower EU, they kind of doubled their targets for hydrogen. But it's not only the EU, you've seen it in the US with the Inflation Reduction Act, as well as also in Asia, actually, in a country like India or Japan. So that's speeding up of hydrogen plants, number one. Number two, with my hat on of Gaz-Uni, I can say that Gaz-Uni has been very fast, but that's kind of the short-term crisis measures of basically building new floating terminals for LNG, which they built in a record time, in 6 months' time in the Netherlands, in the north of the Netherlands, a completely new floating terminal for LNG, which can then indeed now receive LNG from other countries than Russia, of course, so diversifying basically the supply. And the same they are doing together with the German government in Germany in less than a year. So that was also definitely good news. Then with my hat on of IEA advisor, of course, IEA has been critical in advising governments indeed to save more energy, to dampen the demand for gas, as well as, of course, diversifying their supply with LNG, as well as speeding up the energy transition. So the same as for hydrogen, but then for everything in terms of the clean energy. And I think that is happening. So I'm a little bit more optimistic than Francois. I think you do see already some speeding up of the energy transition, at least in the numbers that the IEA is seeing around the world as a consequence also of the crisis. Thank you.
Thank you, Noé. Well, you shortly introduced yourself, but indeed, I'm happy that you got right into the right topic. But I'll make a little step back. Amir, maybe you can introduce yourself, introduce Ardian, and how did it go for Ardian for the since the beginning of the crisis?
Ardian is a fund manager, French origin, but one of the largest in the world from Europe, with $150 billion of assets under management. It has a part of its business that is done in investing into infrastructures, and I'm part of the infrastructure team of Ardian. And in fact, we have also been setting up a dedicated hydrogen fund last year, which is actually the largest hydrogen fund in the world, managing 2 billion dedicated to hydrogen infrastructure investments. And I think that this development in hydrogen is really the demonstration that the push for energy transition cannot be achieved without massive, coordinated, and global hydrogen investments. Ardian has been investing into renewable energies since 2007. So it's going to be more than 15 years now. And this is something we will continue to do. And we have seen a rising pace of investments that we can do in this space. We have recently acquired a company called Green Yellow, which is a decentralized company doing solar panel installation on rooftops, which could be of interest for Mr. Kovacs, by the way. And this is something that we continue to do. But we also see reverse flows on the gas trends and LNG terminals now welcoming gas from other locations in the world because of what is happening in terms of reducing dependency on Russia, but we will not invest in that. We will reduce our investment into fossil-linked infrastructures simply because our investors, the institutional investors, pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, insurance companies, are putting a high request and standards for low-carbon investments and ESG requirements. So for all these reasons, if you want to make a massive change and decarbonize at big scale, you cannot just rely on electrons. You will not be able to invest into fossils. So ultimately, you need a molecule that is low carbon. And hydrogen is providing the solution. It is enabling you to invest into industries, but also into mobility and transport. So ultimately, it is one of the largest opportunities that we have to change the energy mix.
Thank you, very clear, Amir. Thank you for that. We get back to the hydrogen topic quite a few times during this roundtable. So now turning my head left towards Bernard Salah from EDF. Can you introduce yourself? And well, I would ask a question, how did it impact EDF since the beginning of the crisis? But that would be maybe a broad question. So I'll let you answer the way you want.
It's a broad question, so I've tried my best. My name is Bernard Salah, so I'm the head of research and development for EDF, and at the same time the chief technical officer of the group. I manage the technical business of the company. Let me remember perhaps that everybody knows EDF, and the EDF here in the region is one of the great company. We have something around 20,000 employees, so a huge number, and the overall volume of purchase we are doing is around 1.5 billion euro every year. So a great party in the region. About your question about the crisis, perhaps three points to deal with. First is the question of climate change. We have to deal with this question of climate change, and we believe that one of the answer is to go through electrification. Electrification is in fact a way to supply energy with zero carbon through renewable and nuclear energy. It means we have to know that huge investment for generation, new nuclear power plants, huge development of renewable, but also huge investment on mobility, on industry, on buildings in order to decarbonize and to have this technology using electricity. The second aspect of the crisis is, of course, the question of the price. The price for the final customers, on the one hand, they have to be affordable for all of them, even the weakest one, and especially the weakest one, but also affordable for the industry to work on the long run. And that's a huge challenge that we are facing together. About the crisis and the crisis of last year, of course, we had the two big issues last year. First was the Ukrainian crisis, and with this big jump of the price of gas and all the impact that resulted on that. And as you all know, we also face within our company a big issue about our nuclear power plants with this stress corrosion issue. We managed safety, nuclear safety first. We decided to control and to replace pipes on our plants. It was difficult, but nevertheless, as it was said, we did not suffer any blackout this winter, so we manage it. It means that our global system and our global generation mix with renewable, with nuclear, with also the connection with Europe, don't forget that, is resilient at the moment.
Thank you. Great introduction. We dig into that in the next minute. So, Guillaume, your turn. Tell us about you. Tell us about GRDF and how GRDF faced the beginning of the crisis in particular.
Thank you. My name is Guillaume Armanet. I'm directing 2 regions for GRDF in the southeast of France, which is Auvergne-Rhône-Alpes and Provence-Alpes-Côte d'Azur. GRDF is the main distributor of natural gas. In a few years, I will say GRDF used to be the main distributor of natural gas because we are switching from natural gas to green gas at a very high pace the last 10 years. The first biogas unit that was connected to the grid, to the gas networks, was around 10 years ago. Today, green gas in France in the networks is represented by around close to 600 gas units connected to the gas grid. And it's the equivalent of, in power terms, if I may take an image, of 1 nuclear power plant. It's going to be 2 at the end of the next summer and probably 3 next year. So we are in advance. It's the fastest growing renewable energy at the moment in advance. If you look at the planification of the French government. So this crisis for us was maybe an awakening in the political sector of many people who realized the role of gas infrastructures in France in 3 ways, maybe. The networks played a huge role in guaranteeing the security of supply in France. As you know, 2022 was the end of Russian gas. We had the luck, if I may say so, in France that Russian gas was only 17% of our portfolio of supply in France. But the storage were full very much in advance for the winter. And the gas provided, it's help to the production of electricity generation, and also it demonstrated also the European solidarity, as someone said before. France used to be, if I may say so, the cul-de-sac of Russian gas for Europe. With the help of LNG terminals, we saw a reverse flow of the direction of gas from the LNG towards the eastern of Europe, towards Germany, towards Belgium, which in turn transformed this gas coming from diverse locations from the world into electricity and sending it back to France to help us in the times where we had some difficulties with power generation. So to me, this crisis was an awakening on that. And also if I look at it from the consumer point, I dare to say that it was an opportunity. We saw a 6% drop in the consumption of gas, of course, due to the high prices and the attrition of demand, but also to new behaviors of consumers. We had at GRDF, we had a pilot program concerning 500,000 people that we monitored their consumption, and we linked it to the size of their households, the size of their family, and if we saw some discrepancy between the consumption and what it should be, we wrote to them, and then we embarked them on a program. People who were in that program, we noticed an 18% drop in consumption. So that means, for us, this crisis can be also a long-lasting change in behaviors of all our stakeholders.
Very good to have both perspectives, professional, private world versus the citizen world. So thank you for that, Guilhem. I would say let's get deep in the topic. As we mentioned all together during the preparation, we are still in emergency mode. We're still fixing stuff in short term. The crisis is surely not over. This is almost just the beginning of a new era of non-abundance, energetical abundance. So if we try to look at the horizon and think long-term, let's say mid-term and long-term, what should be the one or two key priorities to plan for Europe, the access to energy for everyone? Noé, if you want to start?
Yes, sure, thank you. I completely agree, and I think Monica said it also, and Francois as well earlier, that we are absolutely not out of the woods. I mean, we were, I agree with what was just said by Guilhem, that of course there was luckily enough some kind of change of behavior, but let's face it, we were also extremely lucky in Europe. We had a mild winter, and if next winter is going to be not so mild, you know, we might face real problems. So we are absolutely not out of the woods. We should still increase the storage capacity, increase the storage of gas, and we would still continue diversifying in the short term. So that's first thing, I think. Second thing is that indeed to face the longer term crisis, we should definitely in Europe put much more focus on implementation. I mean, there are a lot of good plans, good strategies out there in different European countries and also from the Commission, but we are, let's be honest, we are terribly slow in implementation. I mean, we talk a lot of consultations. It still takes eight years on average to have a wind farm license. This is unacceptable.
I can see the opposition with the United States.
Yeah, but listen, that's the problem. So we need to be much more in a crisis mode also for the longer term crisis. Speed up those licensing procedures. Get investment going really in low carbon hydrogen and also in other low carbon clean energy, like Francois said, so that we can start replacing more of the fossil fuels. That is really something that Europe can be much stronger in, and we are terribly slow also compared to the US, like you pointed out. So the IRA is now there with a huge, the biggest clean energy program since World War II, basically. And then Europe starts to complain and say, oh, wow, you know, the global companies are reallocating their investment to the US. Well, yes, don't complain about that. It's good news for the climate, and let's put in place something which is as attractive in Europe as the US. That's what we need to do. So we need to get our act together in that sense and really speed up and scale up the investment in clean energy, and starting really now.
Very clear. So it's more about the way we do it. Very interesting. Amir, do you have any thought on that very same aspect?
Well, there was a report published by the European Energy Agency, in the International Energy Agency in January, showing that there is a major shift and also a change in paradigm that we're facing with the decrease of fossil fuel demand and at the same time the rising of production of renewable energy. This has major consequences. First, we are seeing a transition from the industries, which raises the question of the employment and the fair and the just transition that Monica was referring to earlier this morning. We are seeing a decarbonization happening at big scale, in changing geopolitics, because it's at big scale, it has to be done in different countries in the world, like mentioned by François earlier. And this means that we are seeing flows of energy that are going to be massively different. And we are seeing trade rules that will need to be revisited to reflect that. We are seeing, because of this change in paradigm, an instability of the grid. And this will require solutions. And unfortunately, batteries will not be the only solution, because for seasonal or for long-term storage or for large-scale storage, batteries take too much space. They have high degradation. And so ultimately, you need some other solutions, and molecules can help to do it. Like today, the gas is doing a bit of balancing in the network. And finally, there's an issue around security of supply. And production of low-carbon energy will not need to be done with infrastructures that will need to rely on an energy that is the cheapest possible and the most abundant as possible. And this will be in locations which are far away today from the consumption centers. So for all these reasons, we need to see the change in paradigm that is happening in the way we consume and the way we produce energy reflected also into energy policies. And that's why we need to see policies that will accompany this transition with providing just and fair transition tools to the industries to do it, but also include norms and regulations that will stabilize the regulations for the players to have the incentives to make the change.
Interesting. So accelerate, change, find complementary technologies, regulate. And well, that was not planned, but I'll move right away to the somehow next question, because I wanted to mention the political context in Europe. As far as I'm concerned, if we want to move faster, we need to have a good collaboration context in Europe. So Bernard, this is a question for you. With the actual European political context, can we move in coordination? Can we move fast? And I'm referring to some little diplomatic issues that we seem to be facing, and in particular between the vision of Germany and France in terms of what is really energy transition. So are we in the good context to move fast, as Noé was mentioning?
Well, to answer this complex question, perhaps several points. The first issue we must not forget that is we must accelerate and we must invest. We must invest huge amount of money. Money for building new generation capacities. So I was mentioning the renewable and the nuclear power plants. Investment in order to change our way of using the energy, charging station for EV, for example, hydrogen for industry, but also trying to improve the grid by itself, which is going to connect all these equipments all together. So we need, in fact, huge amount of money and huge investment. For this, in fact, EU is key, because in fact the regulation scheme are built at the Commission level. And we need, in fact, a mechanism which give all the big investors in the electricity generation, but also in the energy use, in fact, the means to make those investments. It means long-term visibility on the price, long-term visibility on the revenue in order to make this investment, but at the same time, prices which are affordable by the final customers, as I was mentioning, both the small one and the industrial one. About your precise question between France and Germany, it's not a question between France and Germany, it's in fact different vision of different countries. As you know, in Europe we have a paradox situation in which we have at the same time a common European energy market in which we exchange energy. And this was, in fact, a very good opportunity for the crisis of last year. But at the same time, every country has the possibility and has the power to choose its own energy mix. And it's quite, everybody knows that between France and Germany, and because between in France, in fact, around 12, 13 countries in Europe and the other parts, we have different position about how to implement that. We have to build together. I think that the progress are real, have been done. The mechanism which have been described by the colleagues of DGNR show that there is really some progress about market design implementation, but we need to go further on. That's the key solution, in fact, to allow those investments. Solidarity between us is key. We have to build common mechanism in order to succeed to build those huge investments.
So you're indirectly telling us to be careful with any discourse that might seem to be opposing France and Germany and other countries in Europe, that you should work in a unified direction besides the slight disagreement and also the way the crisis has been managed. So
yeah, we share in fact the same destiny. We may have different vision, but we have to build something together, really together, in order to succeed.
All right, thank you, Bernard. So as we are moving towards the end of this round table, very quickly, I suggest, Guilhem, that you react on the two aspects we have been covering, meaning, let's say, what should be the priority in long term for Europe and European nations, as well as, well, what do we do with this political context? Yeah.
To me, I think the three things that are changed by the crisis we're living right now is the focus has been moved on 3 points: self-sufficiency, the independence, the sovereignty. Do we need energies made in Europe? Yes, we do. Also on resilience, we are entering an era where energies are going to be expensive, and we need everything, and we need everything now. It's not a matter of nuclear or renewables, we need both. The urgency for the climate is so great that we don't have any seconds to waste. And the third one is on cost. I am struck on a day-to-day basis of all the testimonies that we have of people who have a hard time in their consumption of energy. So we have a crucial role in helping altogether define energetic system in the years to come that is affordable. With the infrastructures, we say, in the gas infrastructures, we say they are here, they don't belong to us, we have nothing to sell. They've been invested on for years. Now they are turning into in green energy infrastructures. We need to go greener and go faster. Why? Because gas in France is half of the demand of energy in the wintertime. And if we want to have a system that lasts, we cannot do without those infrastructures. We cannot build so much more new production facilities. That's one thing. And so we need to hybridize. And to me, that's one thing that has worked until now for the European continent, is we want to be the continent of the and not the or. It's not this or that. And our diversity in Europe has been that is what has helped for 60, 70 years since the World War II to build the wealth of Europe, is the diversity. And so we need to aggregate now low carbon energy, hydrogen tomorrow, and what is existing now. And we had to go green fast. And as for the gas, we are ready. We are challenging the state, the French government, and we're saying, okay, Mr. Kovac said, for this region here, 6 years ago, there was no biogas unit connected to the grid. Now it's 45. We can go faster. We can go until 2030, go 15 times more than we do today. So we need to do everything and not waste 1 minute.
Thank you, Guilhem. So I'll give you the opportunity, gentlemen, to have a 1 minute conclusion. What should the audience remember? François, I'll just give you the conclusion. I think as you were virtually with us, we didn't hear you much, and I apologize for that. tell us about what you heard. Tell us what are your first reactions, and how would you conclude on this session today?
Thank you. Well, if I have to say a few words of conclusion, I would insist on two dimensions. First one, the need to act much faster than we do. And I feel that sometimes we lack ambition, we talk too much. There is an urgency to act, to take action. And clearly, this is also a matter of competitiveness of the European economy. So that's the first point on which I wanted to insist. The second one is on the importance to have a European strategy. We very see clearly, on the importance to have a European strategy, we see clearly that there was a weakness if we had 27 different European energy strategies. We saw very clearly that Europe was built on energy cooperation. And it seems to me that we've lost this importance of energy cooperation in the process of the building of the EU. Now it's time, I think, to have a real European strategy where the weaknesses of each country can be compensated with the strengths of each country. And if we don't have a European strategy on this, I'm very concerned that we will still be weak on energy and unable to tackle climate change the way we should. So these are my two key concluding messages: act fast, act united in a European way.
All right, thank you, François. I think you have been highlighting very hard that we need to make choices and to move fast. I see slight signs of potential disconnection between you and us. Who wants the conclusion word? Amir, Noé. I'll give it to you, Noé. Tell us if you, allez, one minute to conclude all this. The pressure is on you.
I just keep repeating, we need stronger realignment between, like you said, Germany and France for a European strategy, which indeed includes everything, low carbon hydrogen as well as other low carbon energy sources, including nuclear. We need stronger infrastructure, and we need an international approach, really open-minded Europe that also looks at, you know, the global market that is developing and how we situate ourselves in the new clean tech race, which is a global race.
Thank you. I was very happy. I mean, this panel has been very interesting in a way that you all have very complementary profiles. I'm happy that we had people from the investment field, energy companies, academic and institutions. So I just want to thank you very much now, and I encourage the audience to come and interact with you and to continue the discussion and the journey. I think we'll have a short break right now, and you'll get back to it in 15 minutes for this next plenary session. Thank you all for your attention.